Well, greetings and welcome to the Dividing Line. It's going to be a busy day for me. We've got the program for the next hour and then a brief break, and I'll be joining Eli Ayala. And we are going to be recording, I know it'll take more than an hour for that one, a response to Cameron Bertuzzi's 9 arguments against sola scriptura. He said he spent What? I've got it right here. Hold on. He said he spent the last year, for almost an entire year, I've been researching and perfecting the strongest arguments against sola scriptura, and today I'm revealing the top 9 reasons why this core Protestant doctrine doesn't work. Each argument builds on the last, so they're actually going to get increasingly powerful, leading to a conclusion that is absolutely devastating, at least in my view, especially the final 3 arguments. And yes, we'll be taking on the toughest objections along the way. Well, there was one thing new. It was the weakest argument, which he thinks is his strongest argument. Everything else was plain old that's been responded to, refuted over and over again. And I did not get the slightest hint from listening multiple times to this presentation that Mr. Bertuzzi actually ever reads the other side. He clearly has not read almost anything on the subject from the Protestant perspective. So, but it's still your standard, oh, look at all the denominations, and it's all due to sola scriptura and all that kind of stuff. It's the basic stuff, but it has to be responded to on a regular basis, and Eli and I will be doing that after the program. So, and I think he said we're not going to be doing it live. We're going to record it, but he said that he does expect to have it posted tonight. So I'll certainly try to remember to link to it. So I'll be sitting here for a while this afternoon, and it's got to be thankful. Remember, only a few years ago, we were going, well, we hope we'll see you next time. we hope that Big Brother doesn't shut us down between now and then. You never know. You never know. I'm not going to start going that direction. Anyway, don't have time today to go into as much as I would like to, but the Joel Webbin group, remember a couple months ago, they put out a video that was just filled with basic level errors regarding the Council of Nicaea and stuff like that. Well, they decided to double down on that. And they brought in a young Australian fellow. Sharp guy, but again, the title of this one was How Sacralism Saved the Church. And I posted a tweet, an X post, whatever you call these things these days. And I said, just a historical note, we just passed the 1700th anniversary of the beginning of the Council of Nicaea, which, 325, 2025, yeah, that's where we are. Constantine did not save the church from heresy back then. And it's wildly naive. I mean, clearly, we have not been teaching church history. And if you know anything about church history, you know that Arianism was not the first heresy to arise. That the church had been fighting Gnosticism, so it was fighting movements from outside. Gnosticism was the greatest challenge that the early church faced for centuries. I think it was prophetically warned about by the Apostle Paul. And they had also, in the East especially, had been dealing with things like dynamic monarchianism, modalism, patripassianism, Sabellianism, etc., etc. And there had been no government intervention because the church was being persecuted by the government. And yet they had dealt with these things. And if Constantine had not called the Council of Nicaea, we would have dealt with the biblical testimony to the deity of Christ. Unitarianism always turns inward and dies on itself. A Christianity without a divine Savior accomplishes nothing, and always ends up in universalism, Unitarian Universalism, etc., has down through history. So, not only that, but again, to anyone who actually reads a little history, you discover that Constantine changed his views after the Council of Nicaea. Now, I know Eastern Orthodox writers and writers later on who, once you had the donation of Constantine, forgery going on, and how important this was in the founding of the papal hierarchy, they tried to whitewash the fact that Constantine was baptized at the end of his life by an Arian bishop, or at least a bishop with Arian sympathies, let's put it that way. And they ignore the Arian resurgence that took place after the Council of Nicaea, the fact that you have, as I said in the tweet, I said, Constantine did not save the church from heresy back then, neither did the Council of Nicaea, 318 mainly Eastern bishops, or the Council of Ariminum, 400 plus mainly Western bishops. Isn't it interesting that Ariminum is semi-Arian, and that represents the West? If you really, really think sacralism is the way, then historically and consistently, you need to start reading up on Trent and Vatican I and II and whatever else is coming down the pike, and go buy your Leo the 14th is my homeboy t-shirts, or if you want to be cool these days, you can go for some EO icons instead. If you want sacralism, we have a long history of it. And if you're literally going to say that the state saved the church theologically, there are certain inevitable ramifications. And it's obvious to me that this movement is going to be a nice, big, broad gateway straight across the Tiber River or across the Bosphorus. Hey, you can, what's the flavor of sacralism today? Anyways, EO, Rome, whatever. There's a history here. And once you start buying into this stuff, there are people who say, you don't have to go that far. No, we can. Yeah, good luck with that. We'll see how that works for you. We'll talk to you 10 years down the road and see how many of your acolytes are now in St. Cyprian's Roman Catholic Church someplace. Maybe you could trade in your Greg Bonson is my homeboy t-shirts that you surely aren't wearing anymore anyway and never understood to begin with. In any case, Arianism was defeated for the faithful by the inspired word of God, which told us plainly that the word is deity and has eternally existed. And when you become foolish enough to believe the church needs to be saved by the state, you might as well chuck every 5 solas mug and mouse pad you have laying around as well, because you won't be believing that stuff much longer either. Hopefully straightforward enough, pretty clear, I think. But this is where this stuff's going. Sacralism never saved the church. Sacralism gave us, oh my gosh, you cannot begin to, sacralism gave us Nicaea too. Okay? And I know, almost nobody knows anything about the Second Nicene Council. Everybody knows about Nicaea 1, but Nicaea 2? Well, we've talked about it. But I think for a lot of people, it goes in one ear and back out the other. And what book is that? Oh, okay. Sorry. Sometimes you see a title like, is that the book I've been looking for? Oh, no, it's not. Never mind. Yeah, most people don't know anything about the Second Nicene Council, but it was called by Empress Irene in 787. And it could not have come to any other conclusion than the one that it did. As a Roman Catholic or an Eastern Orthodox, you have to believe that Nicaea II is infallible, that it's guided by the Holy Spirit of God. It was a political council called by Empress Irene and could not have come to any other conclusion than to teach that the apostles taught us to venerate and kiss icons, which historically is a complete fraud. Didn't happen. Sound historians recognize that. This was not an apostolic belief at all. But sacralism forces you to kiss the icon. I'm sorry, I'm not kissing the icon. So you can take your sacralism and take it someplace else. It just seems that these guys just, they're in these little echo chambers. They're not out dealing with what's going on in the world. They're not out dealing with Eastern Orthodoxy and stuff like that. And so they're willing to adopt positions that will make it impossible for them to defend themselves. Just impossible. But they go with it anyways. So there were a couple things on social media in that area. This is a really good example from my perspective. I've told the story, I don't know when it was. It was during John Paul II, so this has been at least, it's probably about 20 years ago. I posted somewhere, wrote an article somewhere, did something where I contrasted some words from John Paul II with words of, I think it was Unum Sanctum or something like that, just demonstrating evolution in the papacy, contradiction in the papacy. You know, what did Luther say when he was standing before Charles, the Diet of Worms? Councils and popes have contradicted each other. Everybody knew that then. And at least up until 1870, with Vatican I and papal infallibility, it was sort of a, yeah, we all get that. But now the Pope's infallible. You can't have them contradicting each other, even though they have over and over again. So now you've got the development of doctrine and all these other hoops you got to jump through to try to make all this stuff work. Anyway, Bob Sungenis, and I don't know if he would do this any longer, but this was at a different point in time in history, had contacted me and said, who are you to interpret the church? You're outside the church, so you don't get to interpret what the church states. It's like, so I can take a statement from 700 years ago and one from today, put them in their proper historical context so we know what's being said, and no matter what, they are going to be in harmony with one another. That's what you're saying. Because the church is infallible. And it's a vicious circle to be trapped in. So there's a guy, Ozer Cainsaw. I have no idea, but Ozer Cainsaw he actually responded to the tweet that I just wrote in regards to Nicaea, Ariminum, all the rest of that stuff. He said, Arius used scripture in support of Arianism, right? And I said, no, really, I had no idea. I mean, I've never engaged Unitarians myself or translated portions of Athanasius' works in defense of the deity of Christ or anything like that. So no, wow, thanks for letting me know. A little bit of sarcasm there. Yeah, I did know that the Arians did that. The point is, he says, heretics tend to use scripture for their own means, whether it be Arius and Nestorius or Calvin. What's great is that the church has already defeated these heresies, so you might want to just work on renouncing Calvinism. And so I responded about... let me read my response. This is what you're missing if you're not following me on X. All this fun stuff. A serious analysis of Nicaea II will demonstrate to the honest-minded person that the claim of having defeated heresies is always subject to analysis. In the case of Nicaea II, what was defeated is the obvious fact that iconodulia was a relatively new development and was not in any way apostolic. So I have to chuckle a bit and agree with Gregory Nazianzus when, after leaving the Council of Constantinople in 381, wrote, quote, "To tell you plainly, I am disposed to avoid every assembly of bishops, for I have never seen a synod brought to a happy issue, nor remedying, but rather increasing existing evils. For ever is there rivalry and ambition, and these have the mastery of reason. You will perhaps think my freedom intolerable. One present as judge will much more readily catch the infection from others than be able to restrain it in them. So Gregory Nazianzus, who had been president of an ecumenical council, Constantinople 381 is what reaffirmed Nicaea after the Arian ascendancy. He says, he leaves and goes, I ain't ever going back. It's a mess, and councils are a mess, and stuff like that. So he then responds, and here's the illustration. He says, being outside the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, you're not one to analyze any decision made by the Church, especially an ecumenical council which refuted the iconoclasm heresy. Submit yourself to the Church and stop elevating yourself as supreme authority. So here you go. Now, when you hear someone say that, if you ran into somebody on Twitter and they said, well, you're outside the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, what church is that? Most of the time, you're talking to a Roman Catholic. He's not a Roman Catholic. He's Eastern Orthodox. So they all make the same claim. They all, even though they come to different conclusions, they all make the same claim. But here, basically, so you can go, okay, so you honestly think that now, has he ever heard of Hieria, the council that was held before the Second Nicene Council that condemned the veneration of icons? I don't know. Most people have not. 99.995% of people who call themselves Christians have never heard of it. Has he ever heard of the Council of Frankfurt that came after Nicaea II, which rejected the ecumenical claims of Nicaea II, and like Hieria, came to similar conclusions, but less radically expressed than Hieria did? No, probably doesn't. Probably didn't have any idea. But anybody who knows anything about the history of the council knows that Empress Irene, everybody knew what the result was going to be. She wasn't sitting there going, I just don't know. She loved icons. She brought all these monks in who were big venerators of icons. I mean, it was a given at the first session what was going to take place. And then they anathematized everybody from Hieria and anathematized anyone who had ever condemned icons. And the apostles taught us to kiss the icon. And it's just historical fiction. And the biblical argumentation from Nicaea II was laughable. But folks, this is sacralism. This is sacralism. This is what it does. Okay? From the Eastern Orthodox perspective, Empress Irene was a Christian empress defending the church. So if you're going to be consistent, guys, go get your icons and start kissing away. Oh, well, but wait, no, we want Protestant sacralism. Okay. Nothing like making it up like as you're going along, huh? Yeah. So anyway, I just, the circularity, it's so clear and so obvious, but a lot of people they just don't see it. They just don't see it. So where'd the other one go? Yeah, here we go. I'm looking at bookmarks in case you're wondering what I'm doing over here. I wanted to do a quick run through of a fairly lengthy tweet that was sent to me by Charles Tingler. At least, these days on social media, someone who actually puts their name, you almost automatically want to invest some time because it's like, oh, someone who has the integrity to take their position and be known for taking their position. That's worthwhile, even if we completely disagree with one another. More power to you, given all the other stuff that's going on. And I may say a little bit more about that here a little bit later on. Yeah, I will. I've got a couple more tweets here to look at. But so Charles Tingler is a Roman Catholic. Well, it says Catholic candidate, so I'm not really sure what that means. College student, young guy. Okay, that's cool. I'm assuming that's his picture. I don't know. Stunningly, the picture I have on my account happens to be me. There you go. He says, here is the evidence you leave out or dismiss too quickly. While it is true that the Council of Nicaea did not define papal supremacy as Vatican I did in 1870, well, the centuries of development, and again, you can find dozens of Roman Catholic historians that would say what I'm about to say. There's centuries of development to get to Vatican I. And there are centuries of forgeries to be produced before you get to Vatican I. So without the donation of Constantine, without the Pseudo-Isidorian decretals, they come out in, sometime before 800. So they're in the 8th century. They massively increase papal power, papal prestige, and papal claims to the lands there in Italy and stuff like that. But still, that's still not anywhere near the development that you have when you finally get to Vatican I in 1870. And you've got the huge medieval popes who, excommunicated emperors and, unum sanctum, and you have to be in submission to the Roman bishop to even be saved, and all this stuff. So that's way down the road. At the First Council of Nicaea, none of that stuff was on. Nobody had even thought of anything like that. Nobody even thought about anything like that. And as I've said over and over again on this subject, you need to understand something. And J.B. Lightfoot pointed this out 150 years ago. The original claims of authority centered in Rome were due to the church in Rome, not the Bishop of Rome. There's two reasons for that. Reason number one was there wasn't a singular bishop in Rome until around 140. So for nearly 100 years, nobody, even in Rome, thought you needed to have a singular bishop in Rome. So they had no concept of Petrine primacy, Bishop of Rome, Peter above all the other apostles. All that stuff is going to come way down the road. It's all development. And that's why real historians, people who know something about history, recognize the evolutionary nature of these things. And that's why Newman understood it. That's why Newman came up with the development hypothesis. One of the things we're going to talk about with Eli is how weird it is that Roman Catholic apologists today, like Cameron Bertuzzi, will make claims on one side about Protestantism, about the authority of the church and all the rest of that kind of stuff, not recognizing that their own communion has to use the development hypothesis, the acorn growing into the tree idea. So Cameron will say, well, where is it in the early church? To which we go, well, where's the bodily assumption in the early church? Oh, well, that's different. No, it's not. You want to say, oh, well, it's tradition, but it's like the acorn and the tree and blah, blah, blah. So it's okay for you to dogmatize something, say that your eternal salvation depends on it. And it's nowhere in the first 1,000 years of the church, and that's just cool. But we have to come up with something in the first 1,000 years, which, of course, we can. I mean, the evidence for scriptural sufficiency and supremacy in patristic sources in comparison to anything about the bodily assumption is stunning. But they don't know that, not especially if they're only reading Jurgens or something like that. So that's where it goes. So anyway, he says, while it is true that the Council of Nicaea did not define papal supremacy as Vatican I did in 1870, There are several historical facts that undermine your conclusion that Nicaea either denied Roman primacy or operated in a purely regional episcopal model. Well, I didn't say that. You're going to see, as I have said many times, and most of these guys, they don't have a clue what they've not listened to the program. They're not looking stuff up. They don't care what I've written, lectured on, stuff like that. It's Twitter. You deal with that kind of stuff. But as the historical record would demonstrate, we have talked many times about, for example, Cyprian and Stephen. Cyprian, the great North African bishop, was not a Christian for a very long period of time. He was martyred fairly early on in his Christian career and believed things that I would disagree with. But then again, like I said, if you have a brief period of time, it's not like you had the luxury of sitting around and reading broadly in a great deal of good, sound theology in those days. He didn't. He's trying to run a church that is being persecuted. I've read to you, for example, his letter to the Christians in the mines, which is tremendously challenging, amazing stuff. So, the man lost his head to a Roman sword in persecution because he wouldn't renounce Christ. So you give him some leeway there. But anyway, he had quite the tussle with Stephen, the Bishop of Rome. We find in Stephen some of the very first claims of Roman supremacy. And the North African bishops rejected it. Read Firmilian's letter. If you can't find it, go back to the debate I did with Jerry Matitix in 1993. Was that when the papal visit was? 93, World Youth Day up in Denver? I think it was 93. Yeah, 1993. I read from Firmilian's letter where he rejects anyone who calls himself a bishop of bishops and all the rest of this kind of stuff. So this is, 70 years prior to Nicaea. And so Stephen is making claims as the Bishop of Rome. But what's the foundation of that? The foundation of that is not the later Roman theory of Petrine primacy. As J.B. Lightfoot pointed out, the power initially was found in the church at Rome. Why? Because it was the church at Rome. And Rome was still the center of the empire. All roads led to Rome, which meant that a church at Rome would have communion with and contact with pretty much every major church in the empire. Because all roads led to Rome. And the Roman Church had significantly more financial wherewithal than the vast majority of other churches. And so the Church of Rome would help other churches. Well, that would give you considerably more oomph, shall we say, in your authority. So it started off, well, it's the church in the center of the empire. It's the church, written to by the Apostle Paul. It's natural, and the idea of the bishop being the focus of that authority rather than the church itself got a huge boost, impetus historically once the West begins to fall. Once Alaric and the Visigoths visit Rome in 410, and that process continues, and the western part of the empire begins to fall, who's the main person still standing in Rome? The Bishop of Rome. And so what had developed rather naturally, and let's remember one other thing, ding, 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 little history here. I know we're doing a lot of history, but this is why it's important. Because obviously a lot of people on our side don't do history. That's why they're buying into stuff that we managed to get rid of in the Reformation eventually, but they want to go back to it. Put a picture of the Mediterranean in your mind, Okay? And, this used to be true of everybody. But it used to be we all had Bibles, paper Bibles that we carried along, and they had maps in the back. And we learned those maps because sometimes the sermon wasn't all that exciting, and so we were looking at the maps, and stuff like that, because it was colorful. It was better than what was going on up there. Doesn't work quite as well with your olive tree Bible software on your phone to do the same thing. But picture the Mediterranean in your mind, and then put on the map the cities that had churches that claimed to be founded by apostles. Now, some of them were questionable, but that had some type of credible argument that they were founded by an apostle. And then draw a line down the middle. Basically draw a line sort of right down through Greece into North Africa. What you'll discover is that there are numerous churches in the East that claim apostolic foundation. Jerusalem, Antioch, Alexandria, they're eventually Constantinople, modern-day Istanbul. They're all in the East, and guess what? Those are the major patriarchates in Eastern Orthodoxy. How many do you have in the West? One. Rome. So it's no shock, it's a historical reality, that the form of church government in Eastern Orthodoxy are equal, well, supposedly, theoretically, equal patriarchs of these major apostolic sees. Most of the history politically of Eastern Orthodoxy is the struggle for power between, just look at historically in the 5th, 6th centuries, what's going on between Constantinople and Alexandria. How many times did somebody from one side or the other end up in a prison someplace because of the other guy? Yeah, it happened a lot. So you have a diffused leadership, divided amongst equal patriarchs in the East. One in the West becomes the Pope. So history has a lot to do with this stuff. It's very obvious the New Testament has very little to do with this stuff at all. So, the first place you start seeing people interpreting Matthew 16:18, look at that, it's coming out of Rome. Shocking that's where it would be coming from. And yet, even when that happens, Cyprian's like, yeah, so? And in fact, the deacons in Rome wrote to Cyprian in Carthage and called him Pope. They addressed him as Pope Cyprian. The deacons in Rome. So I know all this historical stuff. It's not convenient for certain claims because the stuff that Rome has claimed for itself later is just so historically wild that you're just left going, wow, what's going on here? But yeah, this is so. When he says undermine your conclusion, Nicaea either denied Roman primacy. Well, all I've said is, if the church was functioning with a modern perspective, and I don't think the vast majority of theologians in the Curia today would say that it was. I think the vast majority of Roman Catholic theologians and historians would say, no, this was, they're deeply influenced by Newman. If you're not familiar with who I'm talking about, John Henry Cardinal Newman, his development hypothesis, end of the 19th century, really important stuff that has massive impact upon the theology of the Roman Catholic Church. But they are influenced by that, and so they would go, no, yeah, there was evolution, and this was an early period of time, and yeah, no problem at all. But Roman Catholic apologists will default to Newman when they have to, but to actually be able to do a debate, you can't do a debate as a follower of Newman, because as George Salmon pointed out very clearly in his book, The Infallibility of the Church, around the same time, Newman's hypothesis is an abandonment of the historical field of battle. Newman's basically saying, yeah, you're right. There was no functioning papacy back then, which is our point. But it would become functioning, and it's appropriate that it would become functioning. Well, that's not the argument that's being made by Catholic apologists. And so the point is, if the church were functioning under the idea that there was an infallible single leader of the entire church, it's that guy who's the Bishop of Rome, why are we getting 318 bishops together to argue about the deity of Christ? Ask that guy. That's why when Francis said, who am I to judge about homosexuals? Everybody's like, you're the Pope, I think, aren't you? We're not sure. It's hard to say, you know? So it's just like, okay. All right. So then he goes through some things. Interestingly enough, he does mention the Sixth Canon of Nicaea, which, again, if you go back to 93, 94, I did a debate, Rob Zins and I versus Bob Sungenis and Scott Butler at Boston College. And they had a really interesting way of trying to get around this. They actually dragged up the Arabic version of the Sixth Canon of Nicaea, try to come up with a different way of interpreting it. But he quotes Canon 6, let the ancient customs in Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis prevail, that the Bishop of Alexandria have jurisdiction in all these, since the like is customary for the Bishop of Rome also. Likewise, in Antioch and the other provinces, let the churches retain their privileges. So this is a well-known historical citation from the Council of Nicaea. And again, just in passing, I will mention the vast majority of Protestants who talk about, the authority of the Council of Nicaea. Got to understand what they're saying. They won't necessarily come out and say this clearly. They're only talking about the creed. They're only talking about a very short creed. They're not talking about the vast majority of what the council actually said. They reject all of that. Almost every Protestant I know rejects the canons of the Council of Nicaea because it's a different ecclesiology. But the point is, here you have the Bishop of Alexandria is to have ultimate jurisdiction in Egypt, Libya, and Pentapolis. Likewise, Antioch and the other provinces. In other words, there is a clear delineation of Alexandria, Antioch, Rome. What are those? Those are apostolic sees. They claim to have apostolic foundation. And so, Rich, if you could drop it down, it's getting hot in here. It's just not working as well. I'm not sure it's like the fan isn't running or something. I'm not sure. Anyway, so he says this canon uses Rome as the benchmark to justify Alexandria's authority. No, it doesn't. That's like saying it uses Antioch to do that. No, it doesn't. It's recognizing that these are apostolic. The word sense signals that the practice of Rome is the precedent. No, it doesn't at all. It's just simply recognizing, yes, Rome is, no one is questioning that. No one is questioning Rome's authority in Rome's area. But Rome's area isn't the world. That's the point. And the modern Roman theory did not exist in the minds of the people of Nicaea. The bishops at Nicaea did not believe almost anything dogmatically that the modern Roman Catholic Church has defined as necessary for belief, such as bodily assumption of Mary, immaculate conception, papal infallibility, purgatory, all that kind of stuff. It's later development. That's the reality of the evolution of history in these things. If Rome had no privacy, it was merely another local bishopric, which is no one's saying. Notice you don't put it in a meaningful fashion. This canon makes no sense. The early church clearly saw Rome's status as normative. The canon is not defining Roman authority, it presumes it. But the canon is saying Rome's authority is limited. That's the point. That's the point. So, again, when someone is saying that I don't mention this, I can take you back to 1993. Okay, 32 years ago, in public debate, at Boston College, not exactly known as a Baptist university, okay, where we debated this very issue, read it, discussed it, so on and so forth. The letter of St. Julius, notice St. Julius. When Eastern bishops attempted to depose St. Athanasius during the Arian controversy, Athanasius appealed to Rome. The letter dated around 341, Pope Julius wrote, "Can you be ignorant that this is the custom that we should be written to first, so that from here what is just may be defined." Letter to Eusebians 22. This shows that Rome was already functioning as a court of final appeal. This is not just primacy of honor, it is practical authority being exercised and expected by others. Again, you will find numerous examples of people writing to different churches. When North Africans, not quite 100 years later, when Pelagius and Zosimus, that whole thing with Sermon 131 with Augustine, when people appealed to Rome against the North Africans having condemned them, and Rome said, reinstate him, the North Africans said, take a hike. They rejected it. They rejected Rome's appeal. And Rome backed down. So there are lots of instances where people would appeal to this powerful and it was really a matter of who had the most power. Oh, because sacralism is developing at this time. And so a lot of it had to do with which bishop has the current favor of the state. Let's appeal to that one. So sacralism ended up actually having an impact on things like this, theological things, in the early church. So you'll find lots of elevated language being used to the Bishop of Rome if you want the Bishop of Rome on your side in a controversy. But you can find that type of elevated language being written to all sorts of people if you want to have them on your side in a political controversy. And all you got to do is look at the idiocy that we see in the politics of the United States today. You see the exact same thing. You want that guy in your... Oh, he's wonderful. 2 months earlier, you were saying he was a communist or something. Politics is politics, and that's where you go. And then, of course, you've got the old St. Irenaeus thing. Just look up Against Heresies 3.3.2 at aomin.org. We've dealt with that one before. And again, this is in regards to Gnostic claims of authority and apostolic succession, etc., etc. Let's see. The Council of Sardica, again, gives explicit appellate authority to the Bishop of Rome. Again, not surprising, but this is not what Vatican I said. Vatican I was not saying that there's an area in the empire where the Bishop of Rome would have authority. The point is, if he had it at Nicaea, why didn't he decide this? And if he did decide it, then why do you have the Arian ascendancy afterwards? Why do you even have the Bishop of Rome compromising on it? Why is it only Athanasius who stands firm? If it wasn't for Athanasius, we'd be Arians. That was the whole point. This is all smoke and mirrors. It's easy to work through once you go, okay, politics here, politics there, etc., etc. Yeah, I know. Pope Sylvester did not attend. Historical legates. Some people say that Hosius preside over the council. That's doesn't matter. All that does is actually cause you more problems. Then why did Ariminum do what Ariminum did? And they were Western bishops. More Western bishops gathered at Ariminum and compromised Nicaea. Why? If what you're saying is true. So anyway. So he concludes by saying the canon structure, the appeals to Rome, the authority exercised by Julius, and the testimony of Irenaeus all point to Rome that had unique standing. Of course it had unique standing. It was the only apostolic see in the West. We haven't, by the way, we have a studio audience that's misbehaving out there right now. They're not listening well and clearly not taking notes. They're not going to be able to pass the quiz that is going to be required of them to leave. after the program's over. So that's just sad. So he concludes by saying the seeds of papal authority were already there. The seeds. There you go. The seeds. This was not how the church was functioning at Nicaea. Okay? They didn't appeal to the Pope as the final authority. Where does Athanasius, in his arguments against the Arians, say, I do not need to argue against the Arians. The Pope has spoken. He's the infallible vicar of Christ. What he says ex cathedra is the final authority. Where is that? It's not there. Because nobody believed it. And everybody already knew that the Bishop of Rome had collapsed on this. Oh, he was under pressure. I know. Doesn't change anything. He still did. And even when he did Athanasius give in? When Athanasius was condemned by council after council after council, did he give in? Should he have on your theory of church government? He should have. But he didn't. And aren't we glad he didn't? Yeah. Very important. Let me see here. Wow. Time going by here quickly. Real quick. Okay, just one thing real quickly. I don't want to get into this. It's just so nasty, but I just want to make reference to the fact. The stuff, this stuff coming out from Google Via 3 or whatever it's called, these videos that are, for all intents and purposes, they don't look. You cannot tell by looking at them that you're not looking at a video of a true human being speaking. All the mannerisms, eye movements, everything is all AI. This person, the people are interacting. They're talking with one another. They're laughing. They're joking. They don't exist. Never did exist. And this does raise a lot of areas of discussion that we need to be having as Christians. One thing that's just beyond question, the biblical law of testimony, we must adhere to it. You have to have 2 or 3 witnesses. Oh, but people will get away with things. That's right. They won't before the bar of God, but they will in this life. Because far worse is someone getting away with something in this life than dying and standing before God and being judged in light of that. It's for someone who did not do something to be convicted in this life and justice be completely subverted. Because see, justice will be done in the first instance. Punishment will be perfectly meted out in the first instance. When you mete out punishment against someone who did not do what they're accused of, remember what God's law says? If you bring a charge against someone under God's law, seeking to have them killed, and it's found out that you are the one who's lying, God's law was, you get the punishment you wanted for them. That's how serious. Now you see, if we took that seriously, in our society, it'd be like, we can't do that. People wouldn't report any crimes at all. The point is, God's law does not want the innocent condemned. And because there will be judgment, and because God is watching everyone, justice will be done. But since modern man has gotten rid of the judgment, there is no Acts 17:31 for the modern man, then we have to have judgment now. Here's the thing. I remember, it was probably like 10 years ago. I remember this brief story. It appeared and then disappeared, of somebody that had been arrested and imprisoned, and it all turned out that the government had put stuff on their computer without their knowledge and then prosecuted them for that. That has always freaked me out because I'm only semi-techie. I'm pretty decent with a Mac. Rich is worthless with a Mac, so that's another thing. But I couldn't, there's no way that I would have the ability to know if my system's been compromised. Every time it starts doing weird stuff, I wonder about that. I really do. And so the fact of the matter is, if accusations are made on the basis of digital evidence anymore, I don't think it can be accepted. Not from a Christian perspective. Because it used to be, well, it's the video right there. You can see it. Did you see the thing today where someone did something to where they stabilized and enhanced the 1960s video of the Bigfoot sighting thing? You see that? And it's like, as soon as you look at it, you go, that's a big, tall guy in a hairy suit. It's like, yeah, did you? Am I doing it right? Yeah, this is like it's really obvious, you know. But what if they want to come up with stuff after you die? Video of you doing terrible things. Even if they did it while you were alive, would you be able to defend yourself? Not the way things are now. I mean, it was only about a year and a half ago that I played that thing. It was the first time I had ever heard anyone create an AI voice of me, mimicking my voice. And I'm sitting there looking at it, and the words aren't matching what my mouth is doing, but sure sounds like me. And the first time that happened, I'm like, I don't remember saying that. It's a really strange feeling. Because you start going, but I must have, because that is me. No, you can't go there anymore. You can't go there anymore. So there are some really, when I use the term vile to me is a very strong word. And the stuff that we're seeing online from the Christian nationalist side, and there isn't just one Christian nationalist side. I understand that, but you know who I'm talking about. The Anon army of Christian nationalists. The level of discourse is crashing fast. And the sexual content, profanity content, violent content is just growing very, very rapidly. We're clearly not dealing with Christians here in many, many, many instances. Just they're just tagging along because this is sort of something cool to do. So some guy put out a video. Now, they aren't trying to, this one isn't seriously trying to make it look like me or anything like that, but they're using my voice. They're using Jeff's voice. I can't even tell you the title they gave it because, again, it's not something that an actual Christian would ever say or do. Again, vile sexual stuff. Just that's the way these people are. It's very much reminiscent of 12-year-olds out behind the gym telling dirty jokes. That's about the level of intellect and thought that's going into this. So they have this thing. Again, I won't tell you about what it says, but who pipes in and says, this is art. This is art. But Defiant Baptist. Yes, Defiant Baptist, who for some reason hid his tweets recently. And maybe he's back now. I don't know. He is? Yeah. Yeah, he hid his tweets for a while. In response to that kind of stuff, I'm reminded of a particular verse of Scripture that talks about, and everybody knows Psalm 133:1, right? It says, "Behold how good and how pleasant it is for brothers to dwell in unity." It is like the good oil upon the head, coming down upon the beard, Aaron's beard, coming down upon the edge of his robes. It's talking about the anointing of Aaron, the high priest, and brothers dwelling together in unity. And wouldn't that be wonderful if we could do that? The beard, the oil coming down upon Aaron's beard. That would be a wonderful thing. But I may not get to Soteriology 101. Well, we'll leave it for next time. I have another post that I saved, and that is in reference to the very sad situation with K-Dub that I have not commented on. I think this happened after the last dividing line, didn't it? Because we did the mashup show. That's right. So I haven't had chance to comment on it. Haven't had any contact with Chris. The only way we really did contact each other regularly was on Twitter. Only met him a couple times while I was traveling in Texas, as I recall. Very, very sad situation. Very, very sad situation for that church. This is not the first time that this eldership has had to be dealing with some pretty challenging church discipline situations. I can only repeat what many other people have said, and that is, if what we have read, and I've not seen any counter citations or anything, if what we have read on the website of the church from the elders is balanced and true, then there's only one thing for Chris to do. Submit himself to the discipline of that church. If his wife chooses separation, divorce, that is her prerogative. She's the one that's been sinned against. But he's only got one thing to do, and that is to submit to that situation. But it's just disgusting to me. What is most disgusting, because again, most of these anonymous online commentators, they're not involved in ministry. They don't know anything about it. They've never walked with people through these tragedies. They make fun of sin sinfully, rather than actually having to deal with the damage that sin does within the fellowship. And so they've not seen how wives sin against husbands, husbands sin against wives, husband and wives sin against each other. They haven't seen situations where it's pretty much one person, the other person's doing everything they can, and it can go either direction. So they're willing to utilize situations like this. And so this guy named Austin online said, so odd, it's almost like the uniquely black racial proclivity for abandoning your wife and child wasn't sanctified upon regeneration. What gives, James White? I tell you one thing. I would not want to stand before Christ with that tweet on the heavenly jumbotron. Especially when your heart is the one that's being exposed and judged. Man, you have time to repent now, Austin. You need to really consider that you will be judged, and God knows every thought of your heart. Every single one. Do you want to have that hang over your head, unrepented of? If that doesn't bother you, then I need to talk to you about just simply coming to understand the gospel, because you clearly don't. You don't understand it. But what's interesting was that was responded to. There was a response from Mr. Dumperth of the Stone Choir, Treble Woe. And he said, they're having a very rough week, and May's not even over yet, and then hell awaits. Now, I suppose if you wanted to read that as positively as you could, he's talking about June. Because June is, I'm really hoping that June's not going to be like it was a couple of years ago. It would be nice if June could just be June. June used to be one of my favorite months of the year because that's when school got out. So that's when summer vacation started, and well, everybody got married in June. What you guys got married in May, but okay, you messed it up. But pretty much everybody gets married in June. At least we did. I did. Coming up on 43 years ago, this year. 40. Who celebrates 43? I mean, literally, Kelly's not even gonna be home for her anniversary. She's gonna be in Europe with her sister. You know, I'm like, cool, have fun. That's your that. But I mean, 40 was big. 45 we can do something, but 43, you know, it's like, wasn't Bush 43? Like, it's just sort of like, man, whatever number. Anyhow, so maybe that's what he's talking about. I don't know, but this kind of stuff, wow, it truly, I don't know. I just don't know how people can do these things. Oh, here's some stuff I'll have to go look at later on that just came my direction. We'll maybe get to it next time around. I do have a. I'm just gonna leave this thing up from Soteriology 101 on who the sheep are, and maybe we'll get to that on the next program. But as I said, in less than half an hour from now, I'm going to be on. It's not going to be live, but we're going to be recording with Eli Ayala, one of the best of the next generation of Christian apologists out there. And we're going to be responding to fully the 9 arguments of Cameron Bertuzzi against sola scriptura, demonstrating that Cameron's way behind the curve on this particular subject. Isn't taking the time to do the study that needs to be done to really get into these things. So we will be talking about that. So pray for that, and we'll be linking that to you. Thanks for watching the program. We'll see you next time. God bless.